to share with you an interesting pilgrimage that I had a few years ago. You know, I wanted to know what wine represented here in Revelation 17 because we're dealing with symbols. The woman is not a literal woman, it's a system. The waters are symbolic. You know, the gold and silver and precious stones are symbolic of the riches that this worldwide system has. So we're dealing with symbols. So I said the wine has to represent something. So I went to a Bible concordance and I looked up every reference to wine. And almost without exception, I found that the references to wine deal with literal wine. It didn't help me very much, you know, to look up the word wine. It would give you the impression that wine simply represents Ernest and Julio Gallo. You know, that type of wine. But then I went back to Revelation chapter 17. I said, there has to be some way to determine what the wine represents. I look up all these references to wine and wine in a concordance, and it's dealing with literal wine. And then I read Revelation 17 verse 4 carefully. I said, oh, now I know what I need to do. Notice once again, verse 4. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup, and we know that the cup contains wine, right? Having in her hand a golden cup, but the wine is called something. What is it called? A golden cup full of abominations. In other words, her wine are her what? Her abominations. Because the cup has wine, but the wine is identified as her what? Abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. Then I said, well, then I need to look up the word abominations. And when I looked up the word abominations, a whole scenario opened up to view, which I'm going to share with you in a few moments. Now let me ask you, what does the harlot do with this wine, according to Revelation 17? She's got it in the cup, you know. She's got her wine or her abominations in the cup. What does she do with the wine? Does she just drink it herself? No. She's not the only one intoxicated. She uses it to intoxicate the inhabitants of the earth. Notice Revelation chapter 17 and verse 2. Revelation 17 and verse 2. With whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made what? Drunk with the wine of her fornication. Let me ask you, are the inhabitants of the earth made drunk with her abominations? Yes, because the wine are her abominations. Is that point clear in your mind? It's the abominations or the wine of Babylon that makes people drunk. Let me ask you something. How many of you have ever tried to give a Bible study to a drunk? It's impossible. I mean, because their mind is affected. There's no way that they can grasp or understand truth because they're intoxicated. And so this religious system has given her wine or her abominations to the nations, and the nations have drunk these abominations. They've drunk this wine, and as a result, truth doesn't appeal to them. It doesn't make sense to them. In fact, notice Jeremiah chapter 51 and verse 7, where there's a similar idea. Jeremiah 51 and verse 7. Babylon was a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth what? Drunk. The nations drank her wine. This is not God's wine. This is whose wine? Babylon's wine. Therefore, the nations are what? Are deranged. Do you know what the word deranged there means? It means the nations are out of their mind. They cannot think straight, is what it's saying. In other words, the abominations of this system lead people to be mentally unbalanced, intoxicated in a way that they cannot grasp truth. They simply cannot understand the truth. It's like a drunkard.